Forgiveness is the greatest weapon at our disposal against the devil. It is the silver bullet. Because what does the devil want? What do the evil spirits want? They want evil, they want bitterness, they want revenge, division, hatred. This is the relationship they want to see happen between us and God, and us and one another. He wants estrangement. He glorifies whenever there is a big disagreement that pulls people apart. When we are hurt, we react. We want them to suffer just like us. We want them to pay the price for what they have done to us. But even if that's the case, we aren't ever going to be at peace with that kind of arrangement. In 1993, I remember the news itself as I was experiencing it like everybody else. Reginald Denny, a white construction truck driver, was beaten senseless by black assailants in Los Angeles. The assailants were brought to trial. They were called the LA Four. There was a trial that was filled with all sorts of controversy, and there were riots around that trial. There was controversy. But the part that we do not know is this, that Reginald Denny sat in that courtroom with the families of the four who were on trial. Denny had gotten together with the families after he had gotten out of the hospital and recovered some. He got together with the families to get to know them because he knew in his heart and realized that the only hope for the world was for us to forgive our aggressors. So he got to know them in their own homes, and there he sat with them in the courtroom. Outside the courtroom, he was interviewed by reporters, naturally, very curious as to this phenomenon. And he said that he had forgiven those who had beaten him up. The reporter couldn't quite swallow that, and in the written report afterwards had to say, "Remember, Denny had brain damage." So the understanding in the secular light, when we look at this, is that it takes somebody with brain damage in order to forgive our aggressors. David, today in the first reading, it's a fascinating story. Fascinating story about David and Saul. Saul, the previous king. Saul was probably certifiably mentally ill. He was also extremely jealous of David. David seemed to be much more popular. He was probably more handsome than him. People acclaimed him more, but Saul was jealous of that, and so he actually wanted to eliminate David. There was battles between them to their different armies. Today is an example of that. Saul is in one camp with his army, and David's in the other camp. But David is given a pass somehow into the camp of Saul, and the whole army is sleeping. And he's able to walk right up to where the king was laying down. And there at the king's head was his own spear, plus a water jug. And Abishai says to David, "I can take him out with one thrust of the sword. You'd be out of his business. In other words, you would be saved from him. He wouldn't be able to get you anymore." David said, "No, this is the Lord's anointed." So with even greater kind of, I think it's kind of funny what he did by taking the spear and going back to his camp and then yelling at Abishai, or yelling at the servant of King Saul, who was supposed to be taking care of him. It was kind of his bodyguard at night. Yelled at him. He says, "Oh, by the way, did you lose anything? You know, here's his sword, here's his spear. Want to come for it?" God had delivered him into his grasp, but he did not take the revenge. David's given the opportunity to get this revenge, but he does not take it. Jesus teaches the same thing in a lot of different ways in the gospel today, with a lot of different messages. He talks about loving our enemies, not with the kind of cushy love that comes from friendship, not the kind of love that comes from the relationship that spouses might have for each other, but a kind of sacrificial love called agape love. where you choose to love the other person because God is their creator. You choose to love the other person because you definitely will their good, not evil. Jesus talks about offering the other cheek. What does he mean by this? Does that mean that we cannot defend ourselves with a proportional kind of self-defense? And it does not mean that but it does mean that we are not to seek revenge. We are to forgive. We are to let go of every grudge. Be patient with the shortcomings of others. From these teachings in that gospel, the church has developed a number of teachings about how we deal with our enemies. It says one of those principles is that it's morally wrong not to defend the innocent when we have the opportunity to do so. Morally wrong not to defend the innocent when we have the opportunity to do so. And so when it comes to our, for instance, voting in the voting booth, when it comes to pro-life issues, it's our responsibility to defend the innocent. The second point, it is morally legitimate to defend ourselves from an unjust aggressor. But the third thing is the part where it gets to us. It's morally virtuous to endure unjust sufferings and even martyrdom for the sake of Jesus Christ and his gospel. And the only way one can do that is to be one who practices forgiveness, to forgive. Forgive and you will be forgiven, Jesus says today. You can't know God's forgiveness unless you let go of the bitterness you have in your heart. The bitterness that comes from seeking revenge is the bitterness that creates a kind of lid on our heart. We can't let God's grace in. When we go to confession with this in our heart, we're kind of like just going through the motions. We're not really getting down to the heart of things. Last Monday, I was in Omaha for the 20th anniversary banquet for Spirit Catholic Radio, and Father Larry Richards was one of the speakers. And he kind of blew me away with a very brief, he didn't spend a lot of time on the story. He said that when he entered the seminary in Pennsylvania, where he's from, he was sexually abused by the rector of the seminary. That was something that is really bad. And it's like, what is this? The people who are supposed to be forming priests are the ones who are abusing seminarians. But he went on to talk about his attitude towards that. And he did it this way. He says, I am not a victim, nor am I a survivor. He says, well, he is a victim because he got victimized by this other priest, so how can it be? Because he chooses not to have those as his labels. That's not the kind of thing he wants, because that label means that he is not letting go of the hurt. He chose to forgive. And by forgiving, he could move on with his life, because he put it this way: I'm not going to let my past dictate my present. And so by forgiving, he wasn't going to let that incident dictate who he was today. He learned from it, experienced it, he helped other people deal with the hurts of their own lives as a result of that. That kind of witness is very, very powerful. But he chose to forgive because he knew that that would hold him back from truly being a disciple of the Lord. In that forgiveness, he knew something about himself, and he knew something about the Father. He knew that the Father loved him, and he knew that he himself was a beloved son of the Father. And isn't that interesting? That identity is the greatest grace that God can give us, that enables us to be forgiving people. It enables us to, when we realize who we really are in relationship to God, that these things that happen to us in our lives, that we have a tendency to hold grudges around, they're the things that just make life bitter. And it's just better just to say to the Lord, Lord, help me to let go of this, so that it doesn't hold me back from knowing who I am and who you are. He had to forgive and let go. He realized that, Father Larry Richards did. And it opened the door for his heart to have the grace of God come in. It takes me sometimes a long time to forgive, too. I'm sure Larry Richards kind of collapsed a lot of the experience of forgiveness down to a quick moment. But it takes time for forgiveness to happen in our lives. And the reason it takes time is because we let the hurt get down so deep inside of us. But I reflected for a moment on a step-by-step process that I could share with you in terms of dealing with this kind of thing in your life. The first step in the process is that you make a deliberate choice not to seek revenge. Sometimes that's pretty clearly easy to do. You're just not going to let yourself act in such a way that you're going to get revenge on that person. I'm pretty good at that. The second thing, I'm going to choose not to talk about it. I'm not very good at that. Because I want to talk about it. Because it hurts and I want to talk about it. And when I do that, I realize right away what I do is I hurt that person's reputation. So I got to realize that by talking about it to almost anyone really is a matter of hurting another person's reputation. It is a kind of revenge in a sense. But talking about it to someone like a confessor, that's different. Or talking about it because you need to deal with it in your own life like a counselor, that's different. But talking about it in the sense of just gossiping about it, you have to make that choice too. Next, you have to pray that God reduces the sting so that it doesn't dominate your thinking all the time. Because maybe you've got to run into that person every so often. Maybe you've got to deal with them at work. Maybe you've got to always be around them. You ask the Lord to reduce the sting so that their presence doesn't constantly bring up that pain, but that pain that it brings up is more of a distant memory rather than an immediate one. And that takes God's grace to help lessen that and bring that sting kind of to some manageability. The next step is the patience of waiting for the coolness to set in. Waiting for the power of the event to quit having power over you. And part of what we do in order to get that control over it, or that power kind of gets deflated in the experience, so it doesn't have control over you, is to realize a couple things in the process. To realize your own sinfulness, that you're not perfect. To realize how you have hurt people, perhaps even not even knowing you've done so. And then the third part of that is the praying for the person who has actually hurt you. It seems that in that process of those 4 steps, God is able to weasel his way with grace into your heart. And he's able to give you a sense of peace around the event itself. And maybe you come to a conclusion after it's all said and done. Weeks, months, sometimes years. You look back over and he says, you know, it's really not worth it. It's really not worth getting all bent out of shape about it, because it just hurts me within. Hurts me more by that than how I've been hurt by the situation. There are many people who we look to for example of this business of forgiveness. Mahatma Gandhi was the great leader of India for independence from the British. He was assassinated in 1948. And when he fell after the assassin shot him, he made the Hindu sign of forgiveness. Pope John Paul II gave us that sign too, of him going to the prison to meet with the individual that tried to kill him. I remember the story about Father Lawrence Jenko. He was a priest that was held by kidnappers in Beirut. And he, in that experience during that long incarceration with them, with beatings and different things that they did to him, he recognized that he had to forgive those who were hurting him. Otherwise, he would never experience the freedom that God wanted to have him have, even in the midst of the prison situation. His brokenness and his wholeness before God was able to be accomplished even in the midst of the prison situation. because of his desire to forgive those who were harming him. Usually our situations of forgiveness are a little less severe, but forgiveness nonetheless is necessary in our lives. And it's more of a gift to ourselves than any kind of a release of responsibility for the person who has harmed us. Jesus knew the human heart. He knew the source of